Hey friends, it's Simon Hurley and welcome to the Gel Press YouTube channel. I'm so excited today to be sharing how to use your gel press along with some reinkers. Now these are usually used to re-ink your ink pads, but they are super awesome for getting a really bold effect on your projects. So today I'm showing 3 different projects with a bunch of backgrounds and techniques to use your reinkers with, so let's get into it. Alright, now today I'm using my Simon Hurley Create reinkers. These are a super concentrated version of an ink pad ink, so you can re-ink it, and I always encourage you to get it so that it really prolongs the life of your ink pad, but I love to show other techniques like we're doing today to also get more use out of them. I'm using the 8x10 inch gel press for all my projects today. It's a lot bigger than a card front size, but I like to have a larger workspace than what I actually need. And I like to pull my gel press out and pull one of the plastic sheets off. I leave the bottom plastic sheet on, this way it's not sticking to a whole bunch of things and I can really move it around and set it off to the side, but you can do whatever works best for you when you're using your gel press. So I wanted to first start off by doing a comparison as to what an ink pad would look like versus what the reinkers look like. So I'm going to use 3 different colors of my ink pads, Prom Queen, Slippery When Wet, and Clear Skies, and push those down on my gel press. And then I'll use a brayer to just kind of smooth out and blend in between the colors and lay a piece of stark white cardstock down to get a print. I'll give it a little bit of pressure all over the place, and then I'm going to lift that up, and you can see you get kind of this soft, dreamy blend of color on the surface, and it gives a really nice look. But now I want to show exactly how it's going to look when you use your reinkers. So I'm going in with the exact same 3 colors, Prom Queen, Slippery When Wet, and Clear Skies, and here I'm just going to lay them out. A little bit of the reinker goes a long way, and I'll just kind of add it down in stripes along my gel press there. Now I'm going to go in with the brayer to smooth this out. This part is really important for the reinkers because it's a super solid concentrate, so you want to at least spread it out on your surface. And in between colors, I like to go off onto a scratch piece of paper or a little bit of paper towel to make sure that my brayer doesn't really kind of muddy up colors. So I'll go in between these and brayer them all out, and once it's all ready, I'll lay down my stark white cardstock and give it some good pressure to print it. And there you can see the super vibrant color that you get when you use those reinkers. So that is how those 3 colors look together, and then compared to that really soft blend, of course it's 2 completely different looks, and you can use them at different times, but I love that darker version with the reinkers. Now I like to use reinkers because the cleaning is super easy. I literally just spray it with a little bit of water and it cleans up so simply, and you can move on to the next colors. So here I'm going to use some blues and greens, Tropical Tango, Clear Skies, and some Psych. Again, I laid them down with a little bit of that reinker, and then I can go in and smooth them out with a brayer to blend in between all the colors and make sure that you get that really super concentrated color kind of blended and softened out a little bit. So once that's all done, I'll go again in with a piece of stark white cardstock and get my print. And you can see that those colors just look so phenomenal together to create this really fun green and blue background. And once that's complete, there's still quite a bit of ink left on the gel press. So here I went in and actually sprayed the reinkers just a little bit, and that created this kind of watercolory effect. So I put a piece of cardstock on it just to see what I would get and added super light pressure on top. And this created a really cool kind of water droplet watercolor effect. I thought it was a cool background, and I'll definitely use it on a card in the future. So I love that I was able to get 2 prints out of that one inking, and if you didn't add water, you could definitely get even more patterned prints too. Now for this next one, I'm going to go in with the lovely Lilies Peel Apart background stamp. And this one's super cool because it peels apart, so I can just use one side of the lilies or the full background stamp if I wanted to. And here I'm going to just ink it up with a little bit of VersaMark clear embossing ink, and then I'll stamp that down onto my stark white cardstock there and throw over a layer of embossing powder. This is going to be a really cool way to get a totally different look to a print before you even print it down onto your surface. So I'll add some white embossing powder down, tap that off, and then heat set it till it turns nice and white and shiny. And then we can go in and start our printing process. So I'm going to go in and use a couple of lighter colors for my line. Here I went in with Sidewalk Chalk, Piggyback, and Over the Moon, which are some really nice kind of almost pastel colors from the line. And you'll see that we're going to do a little bit of layering. So I wanted the first layer of color to be a little bit lighter. I'm going to go in then with my Brayer, Brayer those out. You can see those colors are definitely nice and light. And then I'll go in and print those down in the side where my lilies are stamped on my cardstock. And there you can see that wherever those lilies are, it will resist that color, but you still get that really cool kind of textured effect. I like the reinkers kind of add a little bit of bubbles and stuff like that too, because they kind of spread out on the gel press a little bit. So then I'm going in with the darker versions of the same colors. So like I added a little bit of triple berry, a little bit of rosy cheeks, and slippery and wet. And those are just darker shades from my line. Then I'm going to go in with the stained glass stencil from Simon Hurley Create, and I'm going to remove the color with just a rag, so any of the color in between the plastic stencil is going to be removed. So when I lift off the stencil, it'll have that texture wherever the plastic stencil was, and I'm going to lay that back down over the area where the colors will be kind of in almost the exact same spots, but since they were darker, it creates this really stunning kind of subtle pattern in the background, but I really love how that turned out. And then there's still that color all over the stencil, so I'm going to go in with a little bit of water, spray that down, and then add that onto my stark white cardstock, and that's going to get a whole nother print right there. And to print that down, I'm just going to go in with a little bit of paper towel and press it down so that wherever that paper towel is when I'm pressing is going to catch any of the excess ink. And that just creates a really awesome kind of double print there. So I love that with the gel press you get kind of a lot of different prints out of one inking. Alright, so for this next background, I'm adding down my colors again. Here I went in with blue, purple, pink, and some yellow from my line. And I'm just adding those down in stripes on my surface here, and I'm going to do the exact same thing, where I go in with my brayer and I spread this color out. You can see it kind of starts moving the color a little bit, and then I go back and forth to just kind of blend the colors in between each other. And you'll see when you leave the color on there for a little bit, it'll start to kind of bubble up a little bit. Again, I kind of like that texture, but I'll show you a little bit of a way to avoid that in the future. But it's a water-based medium on the gel press, so it's going to kind of move around like that. Now, next I'm going to take that same exact ink, just a little bit that was left on my brayer and on the surface, and blend it back out. And then I'll go in with the prom dress background stamp from Simon Hurley Create. I'm going to press this into there and then kind of wiggle it around a little bit to make sure it lifts off some color there. And then I'll go in and print that down with my stark white cardstock. And I find that with less ink that this technique works better. You can see that really pastel background, and then it creates that lighter version wherever that stamp lifted off the ink there. So that one just created a stunning background. Now for this next one, I'm going to use the gel press petites. This one I'm going to use the little circle there. I love these little tiny gel presses to use as kind of a stamp. So I had mentioned the bubbling issue, and one way to kind of avoid that just a little bit is to add down a layer of VersaMark onto your gel press before you go to do any inking. This is kind of a clear layer, a clear sticky ink, and it has a little bit of glycerin in it, which tends to thicken things up. So for me, I found when I added my inks down, it kind of slowed down the process of it bubbling. At least it helped me a little bit, so I would definitely try adding down a clear embossing ink or a VersaMark to kind of help stop the bubbling as much if that's something that bothers you a little bit. So I'm going to go in with my brayer again and smooth out those three colors that I added down, and then I'm going to go in with the Flower Power stencil and add that down onto the surface and do the exact same thing I did earlier, where I go in with a paper towel or a cloth and remove any color in between those stencil areas, which is going to leave down the color that was trapped beneath the stencil and also a layer of color that's on the stencil. Now, you could totally just leave it without any water and print it down, and that would give a really nice solid lined image, but I wanted the color to blur a little bit, so I stamped it down with a little bit more water to get a watercolor kind of look there. Now with the stencil, I had to add down some water to get that to transfer, and then I'll stamp that down into some stark white cardstock as well, and transfer it down with some paper towel to make sure that any excess ink seeps into the paper towel and keeps a nice clean line. So there's those two prints I got from that circle print. I love these two backgrounds and the differences you can do with the stencil and the circle plate. So now I'm going to go in and show you guys how I finished off some of these cards. For this first one, I took my card base and scored it as I usually would at the 5.5 mark to create a nice top folding card base, but then I wanted to create an easel card. Jennifer McGuire has been making these often lately and it really inspired me. So to do this, I'm going to go in at the 2 3/4 mark and score that down to create an extra fold in there that's going to create my easel. Now for this one, I wanted to do a little bit of partial die cutting, so you'll see that's going to create my easel there. So I wanted my die cut to cut out of the top half of the score line there, so I just laid whatever I want to cut inside of my die cutting plates, because whatever outside of there is not going to get the pressure and it's not going to cut. So I ended up, you see that top area of that easel there, that scored area has the cut lines, and then I also die cut the background out of that same die. And that's going to make it so that when I move up the easel, that background is going to pop up easily and come out of that front portion of that card. And then when it goes down, it's just a nice solid card. Now for the sentiment on the inside, I'm going to stamp down a sentiment that says, "You're one of my favorite peeps." This is from the Hoppy Easter stamp set, and I'll use it more in just a little bit. And then I'm going to adhere that to a strip of cardstock the same size, and I'll adhere it to 2 different strips so that you get a nice thicker area, and this is going to act as the stop for my easel. So I'll take that and then add it down onto the inside of the card about halfway down, and that makes it so that that top part rests on the sentiment on the inside, and when it opens up, it can stand on someone's counter and be displayed really nice and easily. And I love that that sentiment on the inside is nice and positive and shows when your easel is displayed. So then I'm going to stamp down my bunny. This is from that same Happy Easter stamp set from Simon Hurley Create. I'll stamp that down in some jet black archival ink, as well as his little Easter basket as well, and that's going to be the focal point image for my card today. Now I always like to throw over a little bit of clear embossing powder over top of my jet black archival ink, and then I'll heat set that until it turns nice and clear and shiny, but that embossing powder is going to really hold in my watercolor when I go into color. Now for my coloring, I like to go in with a little bit of water to start out with, so I'll always lay down just a thin layer of water before I go in and add any ink down on the surface. I find that it helps with blending and doesn't soak up the color right away then. So then I'll go in with my colors here. I'm just using my Simon Hurley Create ink pads, and I'll go in with a light wash of my color. Here I used Woof, and then I'll add that down, and then when I want to go in and add a little bit of shading, I go in with less water and that same exact color and go into the areas where I want to add some shading. Adding the same color in on top with less water is going to make it nice and darker to add some color there. Now, when I want to add a little bit of warmth, I go in with a little bit of Over the Moon, and here you'll see that really warms up, his face area and his stomach there. So whenever you want to lighten or warm up any colors, add a little bit of Over the Moon to it. So here I added it all down to my card there with the sentiment that says Happy Easter, and I added it on some foam tape. So that creates a really fun focal point, but I love that this card stands really nicely on a desk or wherever someone wants to display it, so they can really easily display your awesome creation that you sent them. Now for the next card, I kept it really simple for this Lily one. All I did was take that background and I just cut it out with my scissors here. So I like these Fiskars Spring Assist scissors for this because they're so small to get into all those little details, but they also have that Spring Assist feature so your hand never gets tired because the scissors are springing back at you. So I would definitely try these if you struggle with fussy cutting. Now I'm going to go in with a little bit of ink. These are the exact same colors of ink that I used to do the gel printing. And I'm just going to go in with my ink blending tool and ink up the edge to make it a little bit darker and more solid. This just brings a little bit of interest, and by darkening the edges, it draws your eye to the center of it. So that's what I like to do if you want to add a little bit more color and make it more bold. Then I stamped down the Have a Blessed Easter from the He Is Risen stamp set from Simon Hurley Create, and that finishes off that card super beautifully. I think the colors and pattern in this one stand out on its own. So for the next card, I decided to take some of those printed backgrounds that we did in different colors, like the greens and bluish pink one, and I'm going to stamp down that Lily background stamp on both of those in some jet black archival ink. Then I went in with my Fiskars Spring Assist scissors, and you can see already here, I'm going to do a little bit of paper piecing. So in the more colorful one, I decided to cut out the flowers. So here I just went in with those lilies and I cut right along the edge. Again, I really encourage you to try out these scissors because they got such a small point that they can get really easily into all those details. And I was just simply able to go around these flowers, they're not too detailed, and cut them out. Then I did the same thing with the leaves, and I can hear those together on those card. You can see that we just created some really awesome flowers like this, and I love those gel press textures that it added in the coloring. And then I was able to take another gel press background and add it to the background of a heart like that. And that's my card base there. And then I can tuck those flowers right inside to create a really fun focal point for this card of florals. So once I've added those down, I'm going to then add a sentiment. And for this, I'm going to use the Sentimental Flowers stamp set. Now I love this one for sentiments, and I like to kind of take the clear acetate sheet and move it around to figure out which sentiment I liked best. Here I went with the thank you sentiment. I stamped that down and heat embossed it onto some black cardstock, and I just love how this card turned out. I love how I was able to use the background for the heart, as well as paper piece together some of those fun backgrounds to use for the lilies. Alright guys, I hope you really enjoyed that video as much as I loved creating it. Leave a comment down below which card was your favorite from today's video, and be sure to give this video a big thumbs up and subscribe to the Gel Press channel so you can see many more videos from some really talented designers here. Alright guys, have a wonderful day. Bye!